Moving on from the women's series, this past weekend was also the World Senior Darts Masters, where Leonard Gates won his second major of the year on the senior tour, beating Richie Howson 6-2 in the finals. But now this question, one of our listeners sent in, but we wanted to discuss it anyway and give it a full discussion because I think it's a valid question. Between Leonard Gates winning 2 this year and Robert Thornton dominating the first couple years of the senior tour, do you think it somewhat defeats the purpose of the senior tour to have players who are still competing regularly at the professional or semi-professional level playing in these events?
It's definitely an interesting question. I think there's a couple of different routes to answer that. I think if the purpose of the tour was meant to be a Glory Days retirement session where people who had retired from darts can be seen again in basically glorified exhibitions. I mean, if that's what the Premier League is, that's definitely what the Senior League is. But, I mean, glorified exhibitions where you can guarantee that you see your favorite stars of yore play one another and don't have to worry about them not being seated in the same section of the draw and things like that. If that's the main function and appeal of the senior tour, then it probably does defeat the purpose to have people who are playing regularly professionally. I think people went into it, if you were going into it with kind of a betting man game stakes, you would say, this is going to be Phil Taylor's kind of place to shine. He's only a few years retired. He didn't go out on the worst game. He was playing really well. He's still been doing exhibitions, so this will be his moment to kind of capitalize on that. But of course, we've not seen that because we have Leonard Gates and we have, Robert Thornton, who, either have tour cards or just lost tour cards. Now we've got John Henderson. Just the announcements of once you reach 50, you can join the tour. On one hand, if it's just you want to see people over the age of 50 who maybe don't have their tour card anymore, maybe you enjoy watching them play and you want to see a high level of competition and have it be just basically an upper class level, then it wouldn't defeat the purpose. Because I think, right now, without having a tour card, where are we going to see Robert Thornton? Leonard Gates is big and playing in America and doesn't have a ton of money to be out playing in England all the time. As much fun as it is to watch him play out here and enjoy that. So it really does come down to what is it meant to be for and what is it? Because, Robert Thornton's going to clean up when he comes off of having his tour card. Leonard Gates is, still playing in matches and playing at Madison Square Gardens and things. So they're fun to watch still. So from a fun to watch perspective, it is still fun to watch. From we're going to bring back the golden oldies and you're going to see all the people that you remember, from your youth or from your earlier years have these epic clashes. We have to remember that those epic clashes, sometimes the top of the game and the top of the games that people had then have long been surpassed now. And to keep those games up when retired and only playing exhibitions to keep them up to the level that they were at is difficult when you're not playing day to day. So when you face somebody who is playing day to day or is playing more regularly, it'll be more complicated. It turns out less results. So I'm conflicted because I don't watch too much of it. Mainly because of scheduling things. So this weekend I missed, big chunks of it due to watching the women's series, for example. But I think what people expected it to be was all your favorites from the days of yore. And what it's turned into is anybody who's 50 plus who wins through a qualifier. And the more recently you've played, the more easier that is. So I can see arguments for both because I think it's quite fun to watch Soldier play. I think he's fantastic and cannot get enough Leonard Gates. At the same time, more Trina Gulliver, more, Bob Anderson, who we'll talk about in a bit, people getting deeper into rounds that people were excited to see play again might have been a little bit more fun for the average viewer. So mixed feelings, really.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to have mixed feelings. I think the senior tour has two concurring but also conflicting objectives. One of those is to give that opportunity for not just players but also fans to see those the players from yesteryears, to see the Phil Taylors, Bob Anderson, John Parts, who no longer are competing professionally, but for a long time did and only went and won world titles and other major events. But the other thing is to give opportunity for players who might want to continue playing competitively or fairly consistently and still have that drive and ability, but are no longer at the level they need to match their heights from yesteryear. Players like Robert Thornton, other players over 50 who might never have reached it, like Leonard Gates, although he obviously was a top soft tip player for a while. And now that we've seen him play steel tip, we've seen what he's been able to do. But also Dennis Harbour, who made the semifinals, Richie Howson. There's a lot of players like that who are north of 50 and still can play well, maybe if even better than they ever had before, and giving them competition that they can play against without having to dedicate themselves against people 30 years younger than them and with the energy of people 30 years younger than them, I think is a key point as well. And you have to balance that. And it's a tough balance. I've talked about it before when we've discussed the senior tour, figuring out what is that right number of spots to reserve for the people who are going to sell tickets, those Phil Taylors, those Bob Andersons, those John Parts, and how many spots to reserve for players who are playing at a higher level, but might not draw the fans. Those Richie Housens and Dennis Harbors is a tough balance to get. And I don't think it defeats the purpose to have them there. I think, in fact, that is the main purpose. The other players are there to fund the event, to make sure that the tickets are going to be sold, to make sure that there's a modicum of sponsorship, to make sure that people tune in. That's why those players are there. They're not there to contest the final rounds unless they up their games and play it. Obviously, Phil Taylor has done it. He's not playing anywhere near what he did 5 years ago, but he's still a force. He's still a player who on his day can beat anyone in this field, and is still a player that you're not surprised to see make a run. And yes, he lost in the quarterfinals, but that match could have gone the other way. And if it went the other way, the way he was playing, he very well could have then beaten Richie Howson in the semifinals. We're not that far off from Phil Taylor having made the finals or maybe even winning this event. We're not that far off from John Part making it and beating Robert Thornton in the quarterfinals. He was 2 legs away because he got it to a final set. He didn't play the best final set, but he forced Thornton into a final set. So you still have that opportunity if those players up their games. But that's not, I don't think, what this exists for. It exists to give opportunities for players over 50 to still compete and win events and ply their trade like they did or might not have done earlier in their career. It invites those other players so that there are tickets, so that the prize money exists, so that there's the attention. And I think, therefore, it doesn't defeat the purpose. I think it is, in fact, the purpose. And we've seen Leonard Gates emerge in the senior events. We've seen Richie Howson and Dennis Harbour emerge in the senior events when we never really saw that much of them before. That's, I think, the actual purpose of it. So I'm going to say no.